I didn't correct the rumor about why I left, and now it's rewriting my life. The first time I realized staying quiet might cost me more than speaking up was when my manager stopped making eye contact with me in the hallway. I didn't know why yet. I just felt it in the way conversations went quiet when I entered the room, in the way people suddenly remembered emails they needed to send whenever I joined a meeting. At first, I assumed it was normal workplace paranoia. Everyone thinks they're being talked about sometimes. Then a coworker I'd known for 5 years asked me, very carefully, if I was doing okay and whether I'd found something new already. I said no, confused, and she nodded like that confirmed something. That's how I learned there was a story about me. Not one I told, not one I approved, just one that had taken shape on its own, passed quietly between desks, refined by speculation. I didn't hear the full version until later. The short version was that I'd been asked to resign. The longer version involved vague ethical concerns, a disagreement with leadership, and the implication that I'd crossed a line without technically breaking a rule. None of it was true, but it also wasn't completely false, in the way rumors rarely are. I had resigned. I had left, without much notice, and I had been unhappy. That was enough. What actually happened was quieter and harder to explain. I'd been offered a role on a different team, one that looked like a promotion on paper, but came with an unspoken expectation. I'd be taking on responsibility for decisions I didn't agree with, shielding people above me from fallout while absorbing it myself. Nothing illegal, nothing dramatic, just the kind of gray area stuff that makes you feel complicit, even if you're technically compliant. I asked questions. I pushed back gently. I suggested alternatives. The response was always polite and vague. This is just how it works. You're overthinking it. Everyone's aligned on this. Eventually, I realized alignment meant silence, so I declined the role. That should have been the end of it. Instead, a week later, I was told my current position was being restructured. I could stay through the transition or take a severance package and leave quietly. No one said it was retaliation. No one needed to. I took the package. I didn't make a speech. I didn't send a long goodbye email. I told a few people I trusted, packed my things, and left on a Thursday afternoon. And then I did nothing to correct the narrative. At first, it felt dignified, professional, like I was rising above gossip. People asked vague questions, and I gave vague answers. It just wasn't the right fit anymore. I wanted something different. It was time. Those answers didn't stop the story from growing. They fed it. Within a month, someone I barely knew reached out on LinkedIn asking if I was open to talking about what happened and assuring me the conversation would be confidential. That was the moment I understood the rumor had escaped the building. I almost responded. I almost wrote out the whole thing, explained the nuance, the pressure, the quiet ultimatum. Then, I imagined that message being forwarded, paraphrased, stripped of context. I imagined it becoming another version of the story instead of the end of it. So I didn't reply. What surprised me wasn't how quickly people assumed the worst. It was how comfortable they were doing it. Former colleagues who'd praised my judgment now spoke about me carefully, like my name was a liability. Friends at work stopped inviting me to things, not out of cruelty, but caution. No one said, "We think you did something wrong." They just behaved like it might be true. And that's a hard thing to argue against because it's not an accusation. It's a posture. I started noticing small shifts elsewhere too. Recruiters who'd been enthusiastic suddenly went quiet after reference checks. A company I'd been deep in talks with paused the process indefinitely, citing internal changes. One recruiter let something slip during a phone call, lowering his voice even though we were alone. "There's some uncertainty," he said, "about your exit." I asked what that meant. He didn't answer directly. He didn't have to. I could have fought it. I could have called former managers, asked them to clarify. I could have written a post, shared my side, named the dynamics without naming names. But there was risk in that too. Because while I hadn't done anything wrong, I also hadn't played along. And organizations don't always distinguish between those two things. Every time I considered setting the record straight, I ran into the same problem. The truth was complicated, and complicated truths don't travel well. Rumors are efficient. They fit into a sentence. They come with a moral baked in. My explanation required context, restraint, and good faith from the listener. I wasn't sure I'd get that, so I stayed quiet. I told myself it was temporary, that eventually my work would speak for itself. That distance would soften whatever sharp edges the story had. Instead, the silence started doing its own work. People filled it with whatever made sense to them. At a dinner with old co-workers months later, someone made a joke about walking on eggshells around leadership, then glanced at me and changed the subject. Another person asked if I missed the chaos. I smiled and nodded like we were talking about weather. On the way home, I replayed the night and realized no one had asked me directly what happened. They didn't want clarity. They wanted confirmation of the version they already held. The strangest part is that I don't blame them entirely. I know how stories work. I know how gaps get filled. And I know that by refusing to correct the rumor, I became part of it. I let people believe I'd done something questionable because the alternative felt like stirring things up, like forcing people to choose sides. But by not forcing that choice, I let it be made quietly, without me. Sometimes I wonder if the story would have burned out faster if I'd addressed it early, when it was still messy and uncertain. Other times, I suspect speaking up would have hardened it, given it something to push against. There's no clean answer, just trade-offs. The rumor hasn't ruined my life. That would be dramatic and untrue. But it has narrowed it. It's closed doors I didn't even know existed. It's introduced hesitation, where there used to be ease. And it's changed how I see my own restraint. I used to think staying quiet was the mature thing to do. That dignity meant not defending yourself against whispers. Now I'm not so sure, because silence isn't neutral. It's interpreted. And once people decide what your silence means, correcting them feels less like clarification and more like revision. I still get messages sometimes. Subtle ones. Hope you're well. Thinking of you. Would love to catch up sometime. None of them ask the question directly. None of them invite the truth fully into the room. They're checking to see which version of me shows up, and I'm still deciding whether to let them keep the one they already have